Good evening, brothers and sisters. I trust everybody is being blessed real good. And first of all, let me beg your forgiveness for the abruptness of the last video. Time out, time's up, rest. But as you can tell, I don't have a lot of fancy video equipment. I just turn on my iPhone and then go for it. And that particular day and the last couple of days before that is my phone and it's just been acting crazy, and it stops when it stops and starts when it wants to start. Just been doing some wild crazy stuff. So I just said, well, we'll just let it go and see what the Holy Spirit does with that, with the little bit that He gave us. And so I trust you've been blessed real good, and I just want to revisit and pick up where we left off. Now I'm using the analogy of a timeout as used in the sporting world. Now most of you know, or some, I hope you're aware of that every sporting activity, whether it's baseball, football, soccer, when I talk about football now, American football or soccer, whatever the sporting event is, there's always something called a timeout. It's a strategic tool that's used in most sporting events, and for various reasons. In an American football game, for instance, a coach might call it a timeout because he sees or senses confusion in the players that are on the field. And so he calls a timeout so that he can bring them over to the sidelines to go over the play that he wants ran, and to dispel any confusion, because confusion will mess up a play. That's why God is not the author of confusion, but He's a God of peace. But when we look at this idea of a timeout, I want us to look at how Jesus called the timeout for His disciples, and because when we do anything, the greatest example that we can follow is the example that Jesus Himself, who is the Prince of Peace, who is our peace, the one who said, "Come unto me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me, for I am meek and lowly in heart, and you will find rest unto your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." And in this timeout that Jesus is calling for, He's calling for His disciples to take a timeout, a strategic timeout, a strategic break in the action, if you will. I think where we left off with was in Luke chapter 21, where Jesus is telling the disciples about what would be taking place at the end of the signs in the heaven, sun and moon and stars, and what would be taking place, and so that we could look up to know that our redemption was drawing near. And then He says in verse 34, "Be on guard," and I think this is where we left off at, "Be on guard that your hearts may not be weighted down with dissipation and drunkenness and the worries of life, and that day come on you suddenly like a trap." That day come on you suddenly like a trap. Be on guard. One of the uses of a timeout. A timeout can be called, as I said, in order to make sure we understand what the next play is going to be next. Or we might use a timeout. Sometimes a timeout is an injury timeout. I better go ahead and try to plug this up because it's trying to run out of energy on me. We need some power here. Okay, now we've got power. So, another use of a timeout is a equipment check or equipment malfunction. Sometimes you'll see the game stopped or the action stopped because there is an equipment failure. If it's a baseball game and the coach might or the catcher might be something wrong with his breast equipment, and when you're getting fastballs thrown at you, you don't want anything wrong with anything. You want your 10 strap in place, you want your cup in place, you want your breath, you want that thing, you want everything wrong. And sometimes, you'll get a misfunction, a snap, a break or something, and so the coach will call a timeout so that you can get that uniform taken care of, get your protective gear in place. Sometimes a helmet will come off in a football game, and that'll stop the action. The referee will stop the action. He said, we got to take a timeout. You got to go to the sidelines and get that fixed. I mean, this is a dangerous sport, and you need that helmet on. And so you might want to use this timeout. The Holy Spirit might be bringing you to the sideline to say, hey, you need an equipment check. You need an equipment check. So we're going to go to right now to Ephesians chapter 6 and verse 10. Finally, see, time out because time's up. And if there was ever a finally that needed to be finalized in our lives, it's at this time. Finally, be strong in the Lord. Finally, be strong in the Lord. See, our strength now needs to be in the Lord. It's not in me, it's not in my righteousness, it's in his righteousness, it's in his grace. And I need to be firm in my conviction that he's got me, that he loves me passionately, that I'm in his hand, that he'll never let me go. I need to be strong in the Lord. Not strong in religion, not strong in my ministry, not strong in the Lord. And in the strength of his might. Strong in the Lord and in the strength of his might. Some of us have been, you've been going on your own strength. Doing it your own way, just trying to get it done, just trying to make it happen. Well, I think it's time out for trying to make stuff. It's time to just rest. And let the Good Shepherd lead you and guide you to still waters. But this time out is a time out for an equipment check. Put on the full armor of God, that you may be able to stand firm against the schemes of the devil. The enemy is always and forever scheming and strategizing. Be sober. It's time to be sober. Be serious about your walk, your talk, your faith. Because the enemy, as a roaring lion, he never rests. He's busy. going about, roaming about, seeking whom he may devour. But if we are strong in the Lord, if we are resting in him and his grace and his mercy and his kindness and his love, then he can't get to us. He'll attack. And maybe some of you, that's what some of you are feeling, his attacks, and you're frustrated at his attacks. But let's take a time out. We come to the sideline now and know that time is almost up, and his time is short now, very short, and he won't be attacking for very long. But our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the powers, against the world forces of this darkness, against the spiritual forces of wickedness in the heavenly places. This is what we've been fighting against. This is what we've been struggling against. And if I said to my brothers and sisters as we assembled to encourage one another this morning, I said, if you're not tired, if you're not weary, if you're not worn, if you're not sick and tired of being sick and tired of battling with this flesh of the ups and downs and the ins and the outs, and if you're not tired of all of that, of whenever I do good, evil is always present. I'm buffeting my body and bringing it under subjection, that lest by any means when I preach unto others, I might be a castaway. And if you're not tired of this struggle, of this fight, then you ain't been in the same fight. You ain't been in the same struggle that I've been in. You need to we come to the place where we're tired. Where Paul came to the place where he said, I run the race. I finished the course. I kept the faith. And I'm dying weary, but not worried. I'm dying tired, but triumphant. This cancer, this heartbreak, this whatever it is that causes weariness and being worn out, it's time to get the equipment check, because we're about to run this last part of the race. Therefore, take up the full armor of God, that you may be able to resist in the evil day, and having done everything, to stand firm. Time out. This time out is for an equipment check. Make sure